The night was restless, cloaked in a silence that seemed too heavy to last. A lonely stretch of highway cut through the darkness, its cracked asphalt shimmering under a pale, reluctant moon. Far off, a faint rumble broke the stillness. The sound of an old pickup truck carrying a tired father and his sleeping daughter home. The air smelled of rain and gasoline, and somewhere ahead, danger was waiting to unfold. James gripped the wheel with weary hands, his shoulders aching from another long shift at the auto shop. Behind him, 7-year-old Emily slept curled beneath a worn blanket, her tiny breath soft against the hum of the engine. He thought only of home, of rest, until the horizon suddenly flashed with fire. His eyes widened. A car lay twisted on the roadside, flames clawing at its frame, smoke billowing into the night sky. A faint cry pierced through the crackling fire, desperate and fading. Without hesitation, James pulled over. He told Emily to stay inside, locked the doors, and ran toward the burning wreck. Heat seared his skin, smoke choked his lungs, but he pushed forward, smashing at the door until it gave way. Inside, a woman struggled weakly, her face streaked with ash and blood. He dragged her out just as the vehicle erupted in an explosion, flames roaring into the heavens. Both collapsed on the pavement, coughing, gasping, alive by the narrowest thread. And then James saw it, a silver necklace dangling against her chest, glinting in the firelight. His breath caught in his throat. It was the same necklace his sister had worn the night she disappeared 2 decades ago. Could it be her? Had fate truly brought his long-lost sister back in the most impossible of ways? The hospital corridors buzzed with fluorescent light, the air filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic. James sat slouched in a plastic chair, hands blackened by soot, shirt singed by heat. He replayed the moment in his mind, the roar of the flames, the fragile weight of the woman in his arms, and above all, the sight of that necklace glimmering like a ghost from his past. Emily sat beside him, her small legs swinging nervously. Her wide brown eyes searched his face. "Daddy, is the lady going to be okay?" she asked, her voice a whisper, as if afraid the truth might shatter. "She will," James murmured, though his chest carried doubt. His hand found hers, and together they waited, time dragging like a slow tide. When at last a doctor emerged, the world seemed to hold its breath. "She's stable," he said, his tone calm but cautious. "A few burns, minor trauma. She's lucky to be alive." Relief washed over James so strongly he nearly collapsed. But the doctor's next words rooted him in place. "She's awake. You can see her now." The room was dim, shadows pooling along the edges of the walls. The woman lay propped against crisp white pillows, her dark hair tangled, her face pale but beautiful even beneath the bruises. Her eyes flickered open as James entered, confusion and recognition mingling in their depths. For a long heartbeat, neither spoke. He sat down slowly, as though afraid the ground beneath him might break. His voice came out rough, trembling. "That necklace, where did you get it?" Her hand instinctively rose to her chest, fingers brushing the locket's smooth surface. Tears welled in her eyes, unspoken memories flashing like lightning. "My brother gave it to me," she whispered, "but I lost him when I was 10. Emily peeked around her father's arm, her innocence slicing through the silence. "Daddy, you said you had a sister once. Is she the one?" The woman's lips trembled as her gaze moved between them. "James?" Her voice cracked under the weight of years. "Is it really you?" His heart thundered, the name crashing against him like a wave. For 2 decades he had buried that hope, convinced his sister was gone forever. And now here she was, fragile yet alive, her hand clutching the symbol of the bond they once shared. James leaned forward, his throat tight. "Gra?" he whispered, his eyes searching hers for proof that this wasn't a dream. Her tears answered for her. She nodded, and in that instant, the sterile hospital room transformed. It was no longer just a place of recovery, but the ground where 2 broken lives might finally find their way back to each other. Morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting stripes of gold across the pale walls of the hospital room. The city stirred outside, but within, time seemed suspended. James had spent the night in the chair by her bed, his body aching, but his heart too restless to sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, he feared waking to find that this reunion was nothing but a cruel dream. When Sarah stirred, her lashes fluttering against her cheeks, James leaned closer. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two lives separated by decades of silence, now tethered again by recognition. Her lips parted, fragile words trembling into the air. "I used to wonder if I made you up," she confessed. "Sometimes, when the nights were too long, I thought maybe I had imagined having a brother at all." James's chest ached as if struck. "You weren't a dream," he said softly. "You were my whole world. And then you were gone." Memories came flooding back. Their mother's illness, the smell of medication lingering in the kitchen, the way their father's hands shook as bills piled higher. The day their mother died was the day their childhoods ended. James remembered standing in the courthouse, clutching Sarah's hand so tightly his nails dug into her skin. He remembered her sobbing when the social worker pulled her away, her silver necklace flashing in the sunlight as she disappeared into the back seat of a stranger's car. "They told me it was temporary," Sarah whispered, her tears spilling. "That you would join me later. But you never came." James swallowed hard, guilt pressing down like a weight he had carried for years. "I begged to find you. I searched, but the files were sealed. Our father, he fell apart. And the relatives who took me in didn't care enough to help. I thought I'd failed you. I thought maybe you hated me." Her sob turned into a laugh, sharp, broken, but laced with relief. "I never hated you. I hated the system, the lies. I hated the empty birthdays, the Christmas mornings with no familiar faces. I built walls around my heart because it hurt too much to hope." Emily, who had been drawing quietly in the corner with crayons borrowed from a nurse, looked up. Her innocent voice threaded through the heaviness. "But now you found each other again. Doesn't that mean you can be happy?" Sarah's gaze softened as it fell on the little girl. "She looks just like her mother, doesn't she?" James's throat tightened. "Her mother passed away when Emily was 2. Since then, it's been just the two of us. I fix cars by day and read bedtime stories at night. It's not easy, but she keeps me going." Sarah reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Emily's hair. "You've done so well, James. I became successful, yes, but empty. My company, my reputation, they never filled the hole inside me. Every deal I signed, every headline about me, it all felt hollow because I couldn't share it with anyone who truly mattered." James clasped her hand, firm and certain. "Then maybe we can start over. Not as the broken kids we once were, but as family again. We can heal together." In the quiet of that morning, surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and the faint rhythm of hospital machines, two siblings bound by loss finally began to speak the truth of their pain. And in that truth, a fragile thread of hope wove its way through the cracks of their hearts. For a short while, James believed life might finally be kind. He visited Sarah every day after work, Emily skipping along the hospital corridors carrying flowers picked from their modest garden or small cookies wrapped in foil. They spoke of childhood memories, of the emptiness that followed their separation, of the quiet joy of being together again. It felt fragile but healing, as though time itself was offering them a second chance. Yet beyond the sanctuary of the hospital walls, the world was stirring, sharp and skeptical. The media discovered the story first. Sarah Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, had been pulled from the flames by an anonymous mechanic. But soon headlines turned sharper. Who is this man? Why is he always by her side? The moment reporters uncovered James's name, speculation spread like wildfire. Widowed father, garage worker, unknown relative. The tabloids twisted his life into caricature. By the time Sarah returned to her glass tower, the questions had hardened into suspicion. Caldwell Enterprises was preparing for a multi-billion-dollar merger with Sterling Industries, a deal that demanded flawless stability. Investors grew uneasy, whispering about distractions, about scandal. In the sleek boardroom that overlooked the sky, her CFO, Victor Hayes, delivered his verdict with a tone colder than steel. "The board is unsettled," he said, his suit as crisp as his words. "You are the face of this company. Every headline becomes our reputation. And this sudden brother of yours, a widowed mechanic, it reeks of opportunism." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She had faced competitors who underestimated her, investors who doubted her youth, and rivals who sharpened knives for her position. But never had she felt her family used against her. "It is not opportunism," she replied firmly. "It is truth. I found my brother." Victor leaned forward, his smile thin, his voice cutting. "Truth doesn't matter in business. Perception does. You are gambling with billions for the sake of sentiment." What Sarah didn't know was that James had arrived early that day, carrying Emily's drawing of a blooming garden to gift her. He stood just outside the boardroom door, listening through the narrow crack. Each word from Victor sliced deeper into him. He looked down at his hands, scarred and stained by grease, and saw himself as they must see him. A man from the wrong side of town. A burden threatening to topple an empire. That night, James sat on the steps of his small porch while Emily slept inside. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline from the garage, his world a far cry from Sarah's skyline. He thought of her sacrifices, her empire, the sharp eyes of men who wanted her crown. Was he stealing her future just by being in her life again? His heart twisted with guilt. Maybe letting her go was the only way to protect her, but fate wasn't finished testing them. Days later, Sarah received a letter from a family she barely remembered, the foster parents who had once taken her in. They now claimed ties to her fortune, even hinting at legal action. They suggested James was manipulating her, that her judgment was clouded. Every line dripped with greed, threatening to drag her past into a courtroom battle. Reporters camped outside her office, their questions cruel and relentless. "Is this man really your brother, or is he a fraud looking for money? Why risk $1 billion deal for a stranger?" The weight of their doubt pressed against her chest like stone. One evening, Sarah broke. She sat in James's modest kitchen, her hands trembling around a chipped mug of coffee. "They think I'm weak for caring about you," she whispered. "They think love is a liability, and part of me wonders if they're right." James reached across the table, his voice quiet but steady. "If being loved makes you weak, then maybe the world has its definitions wrong. But Sarah, if staying near me ruins your life, I can walk away. I don't want to cost you everything." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. She slammed her hand gently but firmly over his. "No, I lost you once because the system decided our fate. I will not let strangers take you from me again. If I must fight them all, I will." Still, the pressure built. The board called for an emergency meeting, a gathering that would decide not just the merger, but Sarah's place as CEO. Whispers filled the city. Would she protect her empire or claim her brother? To one side stood power, wealth, and the approval of the world. To the other, blood, love, and the risk of losing everything she had built. As the day of the meeting drew near, Sarah and James found themselves standing on the edge of two worlds. One glittered with skyscrapers and ruthless ambition. The other pulsed with the fragile but undeniable warmth of family. The choice would demand courage, and it would define not only their future, but the legacy they wished to leave behind. The boardroom gleamed like a cathedral to money, every polished surface reflecting the ruthless shine of ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, the city sprawled below like a chessboard. On this morning, the board gathered with stern faces, their tailored suits and clipped voices sharpening the air. It was not simply a meeting, it was a trial. Sarah entered with poise, though her chest tightened under the weight of their stares. She wore no jewelry but the necklace James had returned to her, tucked discreetly beneath her blouse like a secret shield. Behind her, quietly but firmly present, stood James. His clothes were plain, his boots worn, his rough hands folded nervously. He looked out of place in this realm of wealth and power, but his eyes carried something the others lacked. Truth, Victor Hayes began the proceedings with practiced authority, his voice slicing through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, Caldwell Enterprises faces its greatest opportunity in decades. A merger with Sterling Industries promises expansion, wealth, and dominance in markets we could only dream of. But all of this hinges on leadership, on stability. And right now, our CEO's decisions threaten to topple that stability." He gestured toward James like presenting evidence. This man appeared out of nowhere, claiming to be family. No verification, no legal proof, just a story about a necklace. And in the process, Ms. Caldwell has allowed scandal to overshadow the merger. Shareholders question her judgment. Investors hesitate. This is unacceptable. The room murmured. Pens scribbled. Eyes narrowed. James felt the heat of their suspicion pressing into his skin. He wanted to shrink, to disappear, but Sarah's steady glance anchored him. Then she rose to speak, her voice calm but resonant. Victor is right about one thing. This company needs strong leadership. But strength is not measured by how well we silence truth or bury our humanity beneath profit margins. For 20 years, I searched for the piece of myself that was missing. I found it not in boardrooms or billion-dollar contracts, but on a road lit by fire, in the arms of the brother I thought I had lost forever. Her words silenced the room, but Victor's smirk returned. A touching speech, but sentiment has no place here. Mr. Caldwell, perhaps you would like to enlighten us. Why should we believe you? Why should we risk everything on your word? James swallowed, his palms slick, but when he spoke, his voice carried raw conviction. I don't belong here, I know that. I fix cars, I live paycheck to paycheck. I don't have lawyers or investors behind me, but I have the truth. When I was 10, I promised my sister I'd protect her. Then the world tore us apart, and I failed. I've lived with that guilt every day. And when I saw her necklace that night in the fire, I knew God had given me one more chance not to fail again. I don't want her money or her company. I just want my sister back. A hush fell. Even the most skeptical board members shifted uncomfortably. There was no rehearsed polish in his words. No manipulation, only raw honesty. Victor, desperate, slammed his hand on the table. This is emotional nonsense. Ms. Caldwell, if you side with him, you will lose everything we've built. You will destroy this company. Sarah's hands trembled, but her gaze never left her brother's. Slowly, she turned to the board, her voice rising with the weight of a final decision. This company was never my life. It was my prison. I will not sacrifice my soul for Sterling Industries or for anyone here who believes love is weakness. James is my brother. That is not negotiable. If that costs me my position, so be it. The room erupted, some in outrage, some in stunned silence. Victor sputtered, his face red with fury. You'll regret this, he spat. But Sarah stood taller than she ever had before. No, Victor. I regret the years I let people like you tell me who I should be. Today I choose differently. Today I choose family. James felt his throat tighten, tears burning his eyes. For the first time since they were children, his sister had chosen him, not the world. And in that sacred moment, he knew their lives had just shifted forever. The days that followed the boardroom storm felt strangely quiet. For the first time in years, Sarah Caldwell woke without a schedule dictated by investors or the weight of a global company pressing against her chest. The newspapers called it a scandal, analysts called it a downfall, but Sarah called it freedom. She had traded skyscrapers for something humbler, yet infinitely more precious. She found a small house only a few blocks from James's modest place. The walls were simple. The windows overlooked tree-lined streets instead of city skylines, but it felt like home. On her first night there, James and Emily arrived with a casserole baked by a neighbor. They set the dish down on the chipped kitchen counter, and Sarah, once a woman used to cater dinners and silver platters, felt her throat tighten at the sight. No boardroom has ever felt this warm, she whispered. Life settled into rhythms neither James nor Sarah had ever known. In the mornings, Emily skipped between the two houses, her backpack bouncing as she shouted goodbye to both Daddy and Aunt Sarah before school. In the evenings, they gathered around James's wooden table, sharing meals that tasted of laughter and healing. Sarah learned to burn toast. James learned to accept help without shame. And Emily filled the silence with her innocent chatter. One Saturday afternoon, the backyard became their canvas for something new. James turned the soil with his calloused hands while Sarah, dressed in jeans instead of tailored suits, crouched beside Emily to plant seedlings. The sun bathed them in gold as Emily pressed a tiny tomato sprout into the dirt. "Will it grow strong, Aunt Sarah?" she asked. Sarah smiled through the sting of tears. "Yes, sweetheart. If we water it, protect it, and give it love, it will grow strong. Families are like that too." Her voice trembled, but Emily only giggled, smearing dirt across her cheek as she nodded. James stood a few steps away, his heart swelling at the sight. For so long, his world had been heavy with loss, each day a battle to provide, each night a reminder of what was missing. Now, watching his daughter laugh with his sister, he felt the ache in his chest ease. The emptiness that once defined him was filling with something fragile yet powerful belonging. As weeks turned into months, Sarah shed the armor she had built as CEO. She began volunteering at Emily's school, helping with art projects and field trips. She laughed more freely, her smile no longer a mask but a reflection of genuine joy. Neighbors who once only knew her name from headlines now saw her kneeling in the dirt, baking with Emily, or sharing coffee with James on the porch at dawn. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender, Sarah and James sat side by side on the porch steps while Emily chased fireflies in the yard. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. Sarah turned to her brother, her voice quiet but filled with awe. For years I thought success meant being untouchable, being feared, being the smartest person in every room, but none of it meant anything. She gestured toward Emily, the fireflies, the little house glowing softly. This is what I was searching for all along. James placed his hand over hers, his rough palm grounding her. We both searched for family in different ways. Maybe it took losing everything else to realize what truly matters. Emily skipped over then, her hair wild, her hands cupped around a glowing insect. She plopped down between them and leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder. Does this mean I really have an aunt now? Like in the stories my friends tell at school? Sarah kissed the top of her head, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, darling, you have me. And I promise I'm never leaving again. James blinked hard against the tears that threatened. She's given you something I never could, Em. A bigger family. And she's given me back the piece of my heart I thought was gone forever. The garden flourished, meals grew richer with laughter, and the walls of their homes became filled with the warmth of memories being made. Life was not suddenly perfect, bills still arrived, work was still hard, and shadows of the past sometimes crept in. But now they faced it all together. The empire Sarah once commanded became nothing but history, but in its place rose something enduring. A family reborn, a bond chosen as much as it was inherited. And under the glow of fireflies and the sound of Emily's giggles, James and Sarah knew they had built something greater than any fortune of life rooted in love, belonging, and the promise of never letting go again. In the quiet that followed months of change, life no longer felt like survival. It felt like living. James woke each morning to Emily's laughter echoing through the modest house, to the smell of coffee shared on the porch with his sister. Bardacio, once a woman defined by skyscrapers and stock tickers, now measured her days by moments, a dinner cooked together, a garden blooming with green, a child's hug that whispered of tomorrow. Their story was not perfect, nor was it free of pain. But it was real. They had been torn apart by tragedy, only to be stitched back together by fate and fire. James often thought back to that night on the highway, the fire blazing, the necklace glinting in the smoke. What seemed like disaster had become the doorway to a new beginning. Emily summed it best one evening as she sat between them, her voice simple and pure. Now we're not just two anymore, we're three, and that makes us stronger. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a real beginning. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes the greatest stories remind us we are never truly alone.